Okay, so yun po, nakikita na po ba natin? Ipe-present ko lang po yung screen. Ayan, naglo-loading pa. Naka-present na po ba? Ma'am Daisy, naka-present na po ba yung screen ko?
Yes, ma'am. Okay
Hello
po. Okay po.
po.
Naka-on po.
Okay. Okay, so once again, a pleasant morning to everyone, especially to our motherly school principal, no other than Ma'am Grace V. Mabitazan, also to our mother in senior high school department and master teacher 1, Ma'am Teresita A. Helido, and of course to our equally hardworking head teachers, no other than Ma'am Cirila P. Barte and Ma'am Mercedes M. Narizon. Together with Sir Ariel Salvador, we were tasked to talk or discuss to you for today's school-initiated webinar on the distance learning and module making, supposedly noong July 16 to 17, but unfortunately, na-reschedule po ngayon. Okay, so ulitin ko po. Together with Sir Ariel, we were tasked to talk about or discuss to you for today's school-initiated webinar about the topic distance learning through local resources and inexpensive technologies, or we can call it indigenous, and inexpensive we can call it low technologies. Okay. When we have heard this word inexpensive one, it sounds like a bit discriminating, right? Kasi nga, inexpensive or low tech lang. Very lonely ang dating. So rather than calling it low or inexpensive, why not call it traditional or old technology? Tama po ba? Okay. Sa akin po ba yung nag-feedback? Hindi ko po kasi makita yung yung ating Google Meeting kasi naka-share po yung screen ko. Sa akin po ba
Sir
yung
Ariel,
nag-feedback?
paki-off muna yung mic, Sir Ariel. Sir Ariel. Thank you. Sige po. Yes, ma'am. Okay na po.
Okay, thanks Ma'am Daisy. Salamat po. Okay, so gaya nga ng sinabi ko kanina, when we have heard this word inexpensive or low technologies, pwede natin siyang i-rephrase kasi it's a bit discriminating pag sinabi nating low or ano po, inexpensive. Kaya pwede natin itong tawaging traditional or old technologies. For the sake of the title lang, ginamit. Pero pwede natin siyang tawaging older traditional. And allow us to talk that more later together with Sir Ariel. We will be talking first about indigenous or local resources, on how it could contributes to the implementation of distance learning. Okay, and before we proceed, we would like to give credits to Ma'am Elenita Que, an assistant professor for the educational technology at the UP College of Education for these webinar sessions, because we have this one. Some of these part of our webinar sessions, yun nga po, binibigyan po namin ng acknowledge kasi more or some po ay kinuha po namin doon sa last webinar sessions po nila sa UP College of Education. And also, before we proceed, let's get into objectives po of these webinar sessions. So the first one, at the end of this webinar, we can provide strategies, tools, and knowledge using local or indigenous resources and expensive or low technologies needed to adjust to the educational limitations on school caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Next one is for us to enhance the skills of teachers in utilizing local or indigenous resources for distance learning. And last but not the least, of course, for us to promote cultural sensitivity, sorry po, respect for culture diversity among learners. Okay, so for this first topic, we will be looking into ano nga ba itong indigenous resources or local resources. Why we are going to use them and why we are going to use them in teaching distance or remote learning setting and how can we effectively use this for distance learning. So let's start first for the definition of indigenous resources or local resources. As we look as we look into it, these are the resources that are growing, living, or occurring naturally in a particular region or environment. Okay, um, these are people, event, natural resources, practices, beliefs, languages, habitat, materials, or the like, marami pa po, that are inherent in a specific place or space. And another one, if we say indigenous resources or local resources, these are, just like what I've said, languages or dialects, materials or artifacts, such as clothes, jewelries, fabric, textiles, baskets, accessories, and the like. Marami pa po. And also, indigenous resources are resources available in the community or focus for plants or animals, fruits, and vegetables. Okay. For example, sa atin, sa Dagupan, they are famous for bangus. And in our very own town, Aguilar, famous for ansakit or glutinous rice. So these are the indigenous resources for them that they are parang trademark nila. Famous sila sa mga indigenous resources na po yun. And then we also have arts like music, dance, musical instruments, and the like. And another one is knowledge systems, such as riddles, wise sayings, wits, jokes, stories, rituals, prayers, of course, and the like. And last but not the least, practices, of course, such as wedding, funeral, birthdays, and marami pa pong iba. Okay. And these are the indigenous resources that are what we are talking about. So why are we going to advocate or why we are advocating the use of these indigenous resources, particularly in remote or distance area? So we have these two authors. They are Lodkowski and Ginsberg. Sorry if I mispronounce their last names correctly. They develop a framework for culturally responsive teaching that no one teaching strategy will consistently engage all learners. The key is helping students relate lesson content to their own backgrounds. That was the year 1995. Okay, so why we are looking for these indigenous resources, or why we are looking on how we can use these indigenous resources. One reason is to be, of course, for us to be familiar. So mas nakaka-relate kasi ang mga students natin if they are if the lesson uh if they are let's say they grow up on this, and they spent more on their time, and also this resources reflects on the identity of their identity. Okay, yeah, sense of identity. And of course, another reason is the availability of the indigenous resources. And of course, very easy to access. And last but not the least, these resources show diversity, history that living them with pride, sense of, and a sense of belonging. But how can we use these resources? Okay, how are we going to use these resources? Particularly, yun nga, nagsara muna yung ating mga school during kasi nga we are under this pandemic, and also we all know that also we know and doing what we are doing right now, we are embracing the so-called new normal. So students are not allowed to go to school, even us too. Sabi nga ng DepEd, or sabi sa news, na hanggat wala pang vaccine or gamot, or sabihin natin hanggat zero pa yung case sana sa COVID-19, I already claim it na soon as possible, babalik na po sa normal in Jesus' name. Sooner, we are all COVID-free. Therefore, we have to adjust what we call a home-based learning. But how can we do that? So first, let's look into these areas. Tignan po natin kung paano natin magagamit itong mga local resources na available po sa paligid-ligid ng ating kabahayanan. So let us look into their criteria of selection. So first, it should be available or very easy to access. So naturally, it could be naturally acquired by the community. So yun nga po yung sabi ko kanina, yun pong available dyan na nakikita po natin. Okay? These resources also must yun nga, sabi ko kanina, available and also very easy to access. And another one is, these resources must be a multi-sensoral, or yung tinatawag nating realia, yung makatotohanan, which means that it must be utilized in a multi-sense, meaning more than one sense, or more than one modalities. And one example is, yun nga, the one example is the use of realia, or real objects. And one thing, when we use indigenous resources, it must represents the indigenous people, or represents the daily life of indigenous people. Say for example, in Baguio or Cordillera, they their day-to-day clothes, their practices, their indigenous resources must show diversity. They must respect the sacredness of their practices, and must show, yun nga po, diversity. Okay, must shows diversity. Noong 2014, ang DepEd po ay nag-issue ng isang order o yung tinatawag nating DO number 51, which provides guidelines that the DepEd order were issued to address on how cultural expressions are projected, such in the classroom, the artifacts, the symbols, and the like. They are also uh, presented in a form for uh, for a varied for varied purposes and content in resulting to misunderstanding and presentation. So sometimes indigenous resources are discussed in our class without a validating by the community. That's why they are there are some provisions from the DepEd order, and the following will show that what or the following will show are the resilient that we can look into. But first and foremost, the purpose of indigenous resources must be, of course, must be must be to promote cultural sensitivity, sorry, and respect for cultural diversity. So before using the indigenous resources, we must have the permission. Okay. Another one is authenticity, sorry, of presentations be given that must be given attention, and sacred dimensions of cultural practices must be observed. And just like what I've said a while back, before using these resources, we must have permission first, such as the use of indigenous clothing and related paraphernalia, artifacts, symbols, publications, videos, and other related materials. For example, in sacred dimensions of cultural practices, they are there are requisite on the conduct of cultural practices. Then it must be included for the of included of research. Okay, and next, how to use this teaching. So kanina nung doon sa pangatlong slide na i-present ko po, yung mga tanong po doon, yung una nasagot na po natin, what is this indigenous resources or local resources, and why we are using these uh, indigenous resources. And at this time, how are you going to use, or how are you going to utilize for us to optimize these indigenous resources? Okay. So first, of course, still we can use these indigenous resources for, number one, for motivation. And also, okay, for motivation, another one is for concept building, and next to that is assessment. And also to scaffold. For example, this picture po na nakikita po natin ngayon. Can you recognize, or can we recognize this house? Nare-recognize po ba natin yung bahay? Medyo blurred lang po ng konti kasi na-expound ko po yung picture, na-stretch ko siya kaya medyo blurred. Pero can we recognize yung nakikita po nating picture ngayon? Ito po ay matatagpuan sa saan po? Okay, sa Batanes po. Dahil po sa Batanes, these pictures will show us the different types of their houses on how they were built, the way they were built. As we all know, po, ang Batanes po ay uh, nasa path po ng storm. Daanan po siya ng bagyo. Kaya nga kapag uh, pag may mga bagyo, ang laging sinasabi, ang mata ng bagyo ay dadaan sa Batanes, sa Hulu, yung mga ganyan po. Yun yung mga lugar na palaging nadadaanan po ng bagyo. Kaya, yun po, ganito po yung style or klase ng bahay na binibuild nila para maging strong maging strong po siya sa mga dumaraang bagyo. Parang nasanay na rin sila. So yung traditional belief po nila, kailangan ganyan po ang klaseng bahay na dapat ipatayo. So the Ivatans constructed their homes made of walls of their homes made of stones, gawa po sa bato, which can effectively panangga sa mga bagyo or sa mga heavy rains or heavy winds. At isa po pong trivia, yung mga bahay po nila ay separated po yung kitchen nila from their house. Bakit po? So that when the typhoon comes, they can easily store their foods on the separated part of their house, which is the kitchen po. Yun, para at least, di ba, yung basic necessity po yung pagkain. So at least, meron silang safety. I mean, yung food po nila ay nakaseparate in case of emergency. And isa po pong trivia, ang Batanes po ay isa sa mga isa sa mga lugar po sa ating bansa na COVID-free. Hanggang ngayon, COVID-free pa po sila. So, mapapasana all na lang tayo. Okay, so this, one of the examples, another example po, ito po, yung tinatawag po nating kahong pang-edukasyon. They call it kahong pang-edukasyon kasi nga po, ang shape po niya is square at ginagamit po siya sa pagtuturo, pag-aaral. So how are they use this one? Paano nga ba nila ginagamit? By the way, yung mga boxes na po yan ay made of, hindi ako sure, wooden, gawa po siya sa wood. Kasi they said one of these, and sabi po nila, one of those reflections habang ginagamit po nila ito, that educational technologies is not only for digital technologies. This is also for traditional technologies as long as they enhance teaching and learning. So hindi po nasusukat kahit sa panahon natin ngayon, we are under digital age na. So hindi yun rason na hindi siya matawag na isa sa mga, kumbaga, kahit na ito traditional, ang importante doon as long as they enhance teaching and learning. Kaya nga po, we are discussing today about indigenous or local resources. Gamit po itong kahon na to, ginagamit po nila as a dice po, yung binabato po. Tapos kung ano yung lalabas dyan. Okay? So pwede nila itong gamitin sa subject ng math. Di ba po? So unang subject, of course, kitang-kita naman natin, may mga numbers dito. Nagagamit po yan sa subject ng math. Sa science naman, pwede rin. Pwede nilang gamitin sa science or living or non-living things. Papalitan lang nila yung mga nakalagay dito. Actually, hindi naman math or science lang. Possibly, we can use this kahong pang-edukasyon into all subjects po. Pwede po siyang gamitin. Parang diskartehan na lang po natin kung paano natin siya gagamitin. Siguro one of the diskartes po is palitan po itong mga nakalagay dito. Okay? Depende rin po yan sa subject po natin or yung topic po natin na ating ituturo. Okay. Another example, ito po. Ano po yung nakikita nyo? Familiar po ba kayo dito? Okay, so ito, alam niyo po yan, bilao. Okay. If you notice po, ito po ay gawa sa coconut or nyog at gawa din po sa bamboo or kawayan. These instructional materials was developed from their resources focus in what province po? In Quezon. That province in southern Luzon is known for the coconuts, right? Siyempre, yun yung main product nila, kaya yun yung mostly na ginagamit nila as their local resources. In fact, one of their important festivals is yung tinatawag na, actually, sorry po, medyo natatawa ako dito. Ang tawag po dun sa festivals nila, kasi nga coconut yung tawag dito, yung main product nila, Nyug-Nyugan Festival. Okay, yun po yung festival na important, yung pinaka-highlight sa lahat ng sinaselebrate nila. Which started in year 2015, which celebrates the province main product, which is the coconut. The use of this is to tell what po? So kitang-kita na natin. Oras, okay? It is used to tell time. Okay? Or in short, a clock, orasan. Another one is percussion instruments that are ito yung nakikita natin, yung mga made of plastics. Okay, yung tinatawag natin siyang percussion instruments. They were developed to teach rhythm. What else? Okay, they were developed to teach rhythm, or in short, notes values, or in short, music. Catering to abused, neglected, abandoned children or children in difficult situation. Okay. So these are the examples, or some examples, of instructional materials, or we can call it local resources that can be used in the remote setting or distance learning. Okay, so I'll give you more examples. Okay po ba? First one is corn, rice, and vegetables, as models for shapes and sizes, taste, and texture, and other lessons in English and art. So itong mga examples na to, pwede po pala siyang gamitin bilang shapes, sizes, taste, texture, and other po. Especially sa subject na English at art. Okay po. Next, fruits, flowers, or vegetables as realia for lessons in science, history, and home economics or TLE. So yung mga available fruits po natin dyan, especially nowadays, alam ko marami po tayong mga tanim. Okay, at yung mga tanim po natin ay naumpisan po na po natin siyang naani. So sabi nga, we reap what we sow. Parang yun, unti-unti na natin siyang tawag dito, kinakain or pinapakinabangan ngayon. And then, mga flowers po, alam ko marami tayong mga tanim dyan. At of course, sabi nga, fruits, and of course, itong gulay. So ito po ay pwede pala nating gamitin. At actually, ginagamit na pala natin ito. Lahat, yung mga dinidiscuss ko po dito ngayon, actually, nagagamit na po natin siya nung normal pa po. Na ngayon, mas magagamit din natin. Okay? Sa subject na science, ito mostly yung mga subjects po or mga lessons po na very useful po itong mga ito Is sa science, history, and TLE. Another one is the indigenous knowledge about natural hazards, such as indicated by an animal. Okay, ano ba to? Behavior, sorry, animal behavior. I just want to share dito sa pangatlo na sinasabi niyang indigenous knowledge about natural hazards na indicated po ng mga hayop. Alam ko po, familiar din kayo na kapag may nag-erupt po na mount, kahit wala tayong mga mount po dito sa ating province, yung mga naririnig po natin, kagaya po ng Mount Volcano sa yung kakaano lang ngayon, ano ba yun, sa Taal, okay? You will notice po, yung mga wild animals, or let's say, kahit yung mga pigs or mga chickens po, na mostly meron tayo na alaga, okay, they are running away from volcano. Nagsisitakbuhan po sila. Bakit po? Kasi po, isa po yun sa mga indigenous knowledge sa kanila na kapag ganun po yung nangyayari, yung mga unusual na pinapakita ng mga hayop na po iyon, katulad po ng nabanggit ko, yun po ay nagsisignalize, or yun po ay isang simbolo or senyales na may paparating na uh, tawag dito, may paparating na hazard, katulad po nung pag-i-erupt po ng pagputok po ng mayong uh, volcano, or yung sa Taal po. Another is another example po, yung pong hindi ako familiar dito, Camotes Island po ba ito? Okay, ito po yung pag ang star apple po, sa island na po iyon. Okay, search ko na lang kung ano po yung specific na island na po iyon. Pag ang star apple po, yung ano ba dito sa Filipino? Kaimito, o yun, kaimito. Yung star apple leaves po, yung dahon niya. If seen inverted po from the trees, isang warning po yon na may natural hazards po na darating. So kapag nakita natin na yung dahon ng kaimito ay naka-invert, warning na po yun na may natural hazards po na darating. Yun po ay according po sa Camotes Island po ba ito? Okay, sa lugar po nila. So, meron din sa atin, sa province po natin, di ba po? Mayaman din po tayo sa mga indigenous knowledge, yung mga kasabihan. So, those are the examples of indigenous resources. Okay, so this time, so ayan, nakikita nyo na yung mga bitmojis namin po na nagsisignalize. Ayan po ay nagpaparamdam na we are going to have a very interactive and productive activity. So it's an activity time. So gaya po ng mga past webinars po natin, parang it's a normal naman pag may mga webinars po, um, nagkakaroon po tayo ng activity just like yesterday. So nag-enjoy po tayo sa given activity na binigay sa atin yesterday. At benefit na rin po yun sa atin. Nagbe-benefit naman po tayo. Tama po ba? Para yun po, mas maging interactive. Okay? So based on what I have discussed, sana po may naintindihan po kayo. Okay. I have here prepared pictures, and then you're going to uh, try to figure out kung ano po yung mga concepts na pwede nating gamitin sa pictures po na ipapakita ko sa inyo. Ano bang tawag ko dito? Picture. Hindi ko na i-prepare yung tawag sa games nito. Para picture, hulaan mo, ganun. Sorry po. Okay, so ulitin ko po. May papakita po akong pictures. And then, kasama ko po si Sir Ariel na magpapa-activity sa inyo. Ipapakita po namin yung pictures. Tapos po, inyo pong huhulaan or mag-figure out po kayo kung ano po yung concepts na pwede nating gamitin sa pictures na ipapakita po namin. Okay, so ready na po ba? Okay, kung ready na po kayo, just comment
Yes,
down
ma'am.
below po. Ha? Ready po. Okay, naririnig ko na. Sorry po, hindi ko kasi
So yung
nakikita yung screen
activity,
natin. So, Sir Ariel, assist na lang po ako.
ayan.
Kayo na
So
lang
yung
po ang magbasa tapos
activity
ang comment po
title
nila.
ay ipakita ko ng ano. Ganun na lang po, ma'am.
Ano po? Sorry?
Yung title ng aking activity ay larawan na ipapakita ko, hulaan mo.
Okay, sige. Better po yun. Sorry, hindi gumana yung brain cells ko doon. So, ipakita ko ang, ano yun? Picture, hulaan mo.
Pakita mo, hulaan mo.
Okay? So, sir, okay. So, ipakita mo, hulaan ko. Okay. So, yun po daw yung title. So, Sir Ariel, pwede po pa-assist po. Tingnan niyo po yung mga comments po nila. So, ito po ay open po sa lahat. Pabilisan po ng mga
Sige po,
maiisip na concepts. Gaya po ng mga examples po na nasabi ko kanina, magpapakita ako ng picture at ang gagawin niyo po, i-figure out niyo lang kung paano po ito gamitin sa subject po natin. Okay po ba yun? Okay. So, first, picture. Right? Check po ng comment po nila kasi hindi ko nakikita ngayon dito.
Ayan, ma'am.
Okay, first picture.
Sino yung mauulat?
Ayan po. Yan po yung first picture natin. So, yung mga kasama po namin sa webinar, hindi na po kayo kasama. Okay, so yung first picture po natin, ano po yung ating nakikita?
Tama, fruits.
Sir Ariel, kayo na po ang mag-check.
Ay, ma'am.
Ano yung mga sagot nila?
Mas nauna si Ma'am Bul,
Yun,
ma'am. No?
ano po ang sagot nila? Ano ang sagot nila, Sir Ariel?
Fruits, ma'am.
Okay, fruits po
Ang sagot po ni Ma'am Julita Barzosa, ma'am, ay fruits. Variety of fruit naman si Ma'am Jenny.
Yes, tama po. Saan po sila saan po ito matatagpuan?
Saan matatagpo yung mga fruits na yan?
Ayan.
Si Ma'am Higina, Davao daw, ma'am.
Fruits in Kidapawan City. Mostly. Oh, pero yung mga fruits na yan, meron din sa atin. Pero yun nga, example ko na lang sa Kidapawan City.
Yes.
Ito na po. Ngayon, ang isasagot niyo po kung ano po yung mga concepts na pwede po natin gamitin itong mga nakikita natin mga fruits na yan. Okay, sagot na po. So, what concepts can you see or think that can be used in these fruits? Kahit ilan po yan. Okay lang po. So, si Sir Ariel po, nire-record niyo po yung mga sagot niyo po. Aside from commenting, nire-record niya po yun as our...
So, paano natin
gagamitin
larawan?
Parang ano na rin siya.
Tuturo po mga ma'am and sir.
Namin na ipapasok.
Ma'am, fuel, source of vitamin C. Tama. Kasi na-apply nila sa science.
Okay, may
and
mga
then,
sagot
si
na
Ma'am
po.
Gina, color and shapes.
Ariel?
Tama, di ba, ma'am? Yes, tama po. Ano pa po, ma'am? Kasi marami kung papansin natin picture, marami pa yung pwede
wow, very good po, ma'am. Okay, tama po.
Texture,
okay, so
very
actually,
good, ma'am.
Ito po yung mga gamit na, sorry. Okay na yun, Sir Ariel. At least po may mga sumagot po.
Yes,
okay na
ma'am.
Okay, picture po. Sir Ariel, explain mo. Okay. Another? Sir Ariel.
Another, the size.
Okay, yan po. Yan po yung mga some examples po na pwede nating magamit sa mga fruits na po yan. So mostly, siguro ito ay very present po sa MAPE. Yes po. And of course, di mawala yung shape. Kanina yung shapes na sinabi po, nasagot nila. Okay? Tapos po,
Yes, ma'am.
yung
Exactly.
colors. Okay?
Ma'am,
Yan po. Sa math din, pwedeng-pwede natin gamitin. Actually, lahat po naman po ng subjects, very, ano po siya, useful. Okay? Next po, next picture. Ayan. Okay, wag nyo na lang po basahin yung memes nyo. At hulaan nyo na rin po kung saan kaya yung mga main product na yan matatagpuan. Pero ang main focus po natin is yung paggamit po ng mga ito sa ating mga subjects or lessons. Okay, Sir Ariel, may mga sagot na po ba sila?
Sa
Sir
Bicol
Ariel?
region, nakuha na po ni Ma'am Viol.
Wow, ang galing! Okay, tama po. Ito po yung mga sili at pili. Tama po ba? Pili. In Bicol po. Ang galing naman po ni Ma'am. Okay. So, ano po yung pwede nating paggamitan? Yung mga ito. Sir Ariel, ano po yung mga sagot nila? Sir. Parang ang
Counting
dami-dami.
numbers.
Ano po ba?
Tama si Ma'am Angie.
Wow! Yes, ito po yung most na ginagagamit. Counting numbers. Ayun, may flash ko na okay, counting numbers. At, of course, for taste. Kaya lang yung sili, pag tasting, hindi ko kaya ito. Okay? At marami pa pong iba. Kung ano yung mga naiisip nyo po, tama po yun. Tama po yun. Okay? Siyempre, mga teachers, di ba po? Ang magagaling po tayo sa pagdidiskarte at yung pag-isip po ng kung ano yung pwede nating gamitin sa mga available resources po natin. Ganyan tayo kagaling. Ano po? Tama po ba? Okay. Sir Ariel, next po. Ayan. So, parang nagugutom na tuloy ako.
Yes.
Ano po kaya yung picture na nakikita natin?
Saan po natin matatagpuan ito ay kilala? Isang lugar po.
Yes po.
Okay, nakuha ni Ma'am. Ito yung tinatawag na piyaya.
Yaya. Yaya. Ay, hindi ko, yaya. Basta ang alam ko lang dyan, masarap yan.
Oo. Sa akin,
Okay, saan po?
Tama
Okay,
na kuha
malapit
din
po
ni
ata
Ma'am
siya eh.
Teng.
Ay, wow, ang galing naman ni Ma'am Teng. Saan po? Saang lugar? Sa Iloilo. Okay, mostly, ito ay main product po ng Iloilo.
Saan natin
Tama po.
matatagpuan ito, Ma'am?
Okay. Ayan, i-flash ko na, sir. Okay, ngayon naman po, saan po natin siya pwedeng gamitin? Okay, medyo nakakapag-isip na tayo ngayon kasi yung mga examples na nabibigyan tayo ng ideas, ano po ba, kung paano natin or saan natin magagamit itong mga available resources
Si Ma'am Padlan. Lumalaban talaga si Ma'am Padlan. Teaching circles and fraction.
Wow, talagang relate si Ma'am Angie dahil syempre, alam ko, isa sa mga ginagamit nila is yung mga available or local resources kapag sila nagtuturo ng math. Especially sa elementary, tama po ba? Kasi ang mga bata, lalo pag sa elementary, parang na-appreciate nila kung makikita nila na real yung ginagamit natin na instruction ng materials. Katulad po ng sinabi ko kanina, yung mga functions po niya, kailangan easy to access, available po siya, tapos yung kung po pwede real, para mas namomotivate natin yung mga bata. Okay? Okay po ba? So, saan po siya nagagamit? Ma'am Angie? Sa?
Pwedeng gamitin, Ma'am Angie.
Sir Ariel? Yung iba po. Saan po? Sa fraction.
Opo, ma'am. Itong
Okay, mostly po sa fractions po siya nagagamit. Ayan, i-divide lang siya. 1/2,
yun nga po,
1/4,
ma'am. Ako
1/3, sorry, 1/3, 1/8. Okay. At marami pa po, hindi lang sa math or hindi lang fractions po siya pwedeng gamitin. Saan pa po? Okay. Meron pa ang mga sagot, Sir Ariel?
Another example, ma'am, yung shape lang. Yes po, ma'am. Yung shape color, shape,
Yes
color
po,
wheel.
oo.
Pwede rin kasi makikita
Yes,
ng mga
tama.
bata yung mga different colors.
Yes, tama
Shapes,
po.
color,
Tama, sir.
texture, taste. Yeah, bebet si Madam
Yes,
now.
galing
Ma'am,
naman.
taste. Pwede din yung
Thank
sabi
you
ni Sir
po.
Eugene sa size.
Yes, tama din po yun. Tama. So, yun nga.
Sa lahat po ng mga sagot niya, ma'am,
Sino po ang nangunguna? Sino po ang namumuro? Ayon sa records niyo po, Sir Ariel.
parang pantay na sila, Ma'am Biol and si Ma'am Angie.
Wow!
Pangalawa,
Tapos
Madam
sino pa po?
Teng.
Wow! Yay! Sino pa po? Siguro yung mga iba madami gusto sana nila kaya lang siguro nahihirapan sila sa internet pag-click parang tawag dito resend kasi experience ko din po yun eh. May sagot na or may gusto akong hindi siya nag-send dahil sa internet connection. Okay? Huwag po kayo mag-alala kung hindi po tayo nakahabol or hindi po nakasunod yung ating internet connection. Meron pa po tayong pag-asa mamaya po. Okay? So, for the second part po, the use of inexpensive technologies. Okay? Or these are the low technologies. Okay, Sir Ariel, pwede na pong pa-off po yung audio. Okay lang po ba? Okay, salamat po. Okay, the second part of our webinar for today is the use of inexpensive or low technologies for distance learning. Okay, just like what I have presented on the first slide, we are going to talk about what is this inexpensive or low technologies. How are we going to use these low or inexpensive technologies, and why are we going to use this one? How and or what? Why and how are these resources can be optimized for a distance learning? Kagaya po ng sinabi ko na yung word na inexpensive, pwede natin siyang i-rephrase to a low or to a traditional or old technologies because way back around siguro mga 90s, we can also call these old technologies. These are the, for example, yung mga radio for audio. So I think these are one of the ideal for the new normal. Okay? So ideal po siya ngayon sa panahon natin ngayon. Okay? And another example is the TV or television for or video. And of course, hindi mawawala yung ating mga basic mobile phones or yung tinatawag natin ngayong smartphones. Okay? But before we proceed to discuss these low or inexpensive technologies, let us see first or let us find out first or let us know first the challenges in using these low or inexpensive technologies. Ano nga ba yung mga challenges na kakaharapin natin na hinaharap na natin actually ngayon na nararamdaman na natin? So, low and expensive technologies pero may mga challenges pa rin. Actually, kahit na gaano kababa yan or kahit kababaw yung isang bagay, di ba po? present palagi yung mga challenges. Kasi without challenges, hindi tayo magiging, tawag dito, hindi, parang sa problema, kung walang challenges, di ba po, hindi tayo magiging strong. So, nilikha yung challenges na yan para maging strong tayo. At as we all know po, yung mga challenges na yan, yung mga difficulties na may encounter natin, siguro hindi siya nilikha kung wala po siyang solusyon. Okay? Alright. So, ito po yung bumulaga sa atin when we consider yung number 1 na sinabi ko kanina. Ito yung unang challenge natin. Basahin muna natin. Unavailable educational content in audio-visual formats. Okay, so ito po yung bumulaga sa atin when we considered radio or video or yung radio and TV as an option for broadcasting modality for teaching in a remote area. So, maganda nga sana siya, kaya lang, hindi naman lahat pwedeng maka-access nito or available sa kanila. Hindi naman lahat may cellphones, may internet, mga ganun po. Kahit na inexpensive or low technologies po siya. Next challenge. Difficulty in producing content in quantity and quality in a short time. Konti na lang po yung time for us to prepare all these materials. And if opening na po ng school natin ay talagang mapupush through sa August 24, yun, medyo malabo na po. Limited time na kasi, di ba po? Kasi July na po ngayon. As mamaya, July na, tas ano ba, July 20, ano ba ngayon? So, 23. So, mamaya, mag-August na. So, yun. Therefore, we are really having to work double time. We fast track the production of the content using this radio and TV. So, kung ipupush natin, kailangan talagang i-double time natin. So, hindi naman po pwede na madaliin natin na hindi naman okay or hindi pa ready. Kaya nga, yun nga, na ang best way ay yung ginagawa na po natin ngayon, which is yung modular distance learning. Pero possibly pa na pwedeng gamitin ito. Kasi, syempre, as days went by, magagamit din po natin itong mga low technologies na po ito. Okay? Next, another challenge is the absence of or limited pre-existing partnerships for the design, for the production, for the broadcasting of the educational content. So, kung gagamit po tayo, sorry. Kasi po, ganito yan. I think ito po yung very important na kailangan, dito, hindi, parang ito yung highlights or i-highlight, ng isa sa mga challenges po. So kung gagamit po tayo ng ganito, mga, for example, yung radio or TV, or ng audio or ng video, these are the challenges that confront us and we have to overcome for us to be able to reach out for our students, especially those who do not have the access in internet or digital technologies. So, yun nga, medyo malaki-laking challenge talaga hamon sa atin. Ano po? And, ayun, bakit nawala? Hindi nakita yung sa baba. Okay, ito po. Lack of how and Lack of how and the expertise in monitoring and evaluating learning. Okay, so in using these inexpensive or low technologies, we must be guided, okay, by these principles. Next slide na tayo. Sorry. Next slide. Okay, we must be guided in these following general principles. First one is about learner engagement. Okay, in the use of any technologies, one important principle is we must uphold students' learning. Tama po ba? Okay, next. Okay, doon muna tayo sa learner engagement. And this first principle can be done by implementing activities that will engage them to achieve mastery of the concepts. Okay, second principle is the affordability, okay, or easy to access or easy to use. The second principle, we thought for a while, dahil digital na ang ating environment, ito din po yung isa sa mga culture natin sa mga schools. Tama po ba? So, what we did or what the institutions instill was to train teachers to use ICT or digitization for the resources. Why? For us to enhance teaching and learning. And many research have shown also that this one, or indeed, this promotes academic performance. But about how about in areas of socioeconomics resources? And of course, that area that have no TV or have no cell phones or other modalities or devices that connect to internet, especially at this time of pandemic. Okay? So yun po. Yung nabanggit na rin kanina na challenge. Okay? Next. Yung affordability, accessibility, sorry. Okay, the same lang. Next is the sustainability. Okay, nadagdagan po yung sustainability. Okay, it's also important that these materials can be reused when schools reopened and reach out the out of school children. So, sustain. Yung mga ginagamit na po natin ngayon, and I mean, yung gagamitin natin for the upcoming school year na mag-open ng August 24, ay pwede natin gamitin ulit kapag bumalik na as soon as possible and bumalik na sa normal ang lahat. So, pwede natin siyang i-sustain, gamitin ulit. Okay? And the next slide or the next topic will be discussed or will be continued by no other than, ito na po, yung isa sa mga speakers po ngayong araw na to na aking kasama ay walang iba kundi po si Sir Ariel Salvador. Okay, Sir Ariel, the floor is yours. I mean the screen or the and video audio are now yours. Okay? Si Ariel na po.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am May. So, good morning sa ating lahat.
Wait lang po, i-off ko lang po yung audio.
Okay na, Ma'am May.
Hello, sir. Pag ano po, naibalik ko na po
Yes,
doon sa
ma'am.
screen ko po kasi nawawala po. I mean, pag napunta po ako doon sa screen, hindi ko po makikita itong ano, hindi ko siya mai-off or mai-mute. So kapag nandoon na po ako dito po,
Okay lang,
pwede na
ma'am,
po
na
kayo
kahit
mag-umpisa.
mo muna, ma'am.
Okay po
Yes,
ba, sir? Sir Ariel?
Okay, good morning to each and everyone.
Okay, pag
Yes, ma'am.
pag na-play ko na po yung ating PowerPoint po, pwede na kayo mag-start. Okay po? Okay. So i-mute ko na po siya.
So once again, good morning to each and everyone. As Ma'am Mayan said a while ago, our topic for today is all about distance learning through local resources and expensive technologies. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected systems. It has a great impact on teaching and learning not only in our country, but as far as I was, in order to lessen those problems in education, the Department of Education has created the distance learning that helps to alleviate the method of studying in which lectures are broadcast or classes are conducted correspondence or over the internet without the students needing to attend a school. Today, just join me for a remarkable discussions because I am glad to explicate and elucidate distance learning through local resources and inexpensive technologies. So before tayo dadako sa ating topic, meron pa akong i-share sa inyo na parang konti lang na ano ko noong seminar ko noong mga tinawag nila yung mga newly hired teachers. So ito yung isang sinabi ng speakers na tumatak sa aking isip. So the past is where you learn the lessons. The future is where you apply the lessons. There is a voice that does not speak you, just need to focus. But most importantly, you should have the listening ears to listen.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Sir, medyo choppy po tapos nag-e-echo po yung voice niyo. Sir Ariel.
Yes, ma'am.
Nag-e-echo po yung
Okay na
voice.
po ba, ma'am?
Opo. May presentation po kayo, sir.
Wait lang, ma'am. Kasi katabi ko si Ma'am Angie.
May
Nag-echo
presentation,
yung sa kanila, ma'am.
may presentation po kayo, sir.
Ma'am, may yung presentation. Ma'am May?
Hindi po kasi nila nakikita, sir. Yung
Yes, hello.
May
Hello
yung
po.
presentation po.
Naka-present naman po
Wala
yung
po,
screen.
ma'am.
Hindi po ba naka-present? Naka-present
Wala
naman
po.
po. Nakikita niyo
Opo,
po ba
wala,
yung screen ko ngayon?
wala po siya. Wala
Naka-present
po yung
siya?
screen.
Ano, hindi pa po siya nag-start. Introduction lang
Okay
po yung
po.
ginagawa
Sige po.
niya. Kaya po hindi ko pa po nililipat. Okay po. Sige po. Thank you.
Start na, Ma'am May.
Sige. Ayan na. Wait lang,
Okay.
i-off ko muna.
So let's go to the radio audio programming. We all know that radio is a potential tool to reach by their audiences. Using of radio and television as a distance learning solution is a powerful way to bridge the digital educational sector and reach the most marginalized learner. Kung papansinin natin, itong mga radio is a non-visual, meaning hindi natin nakikita. Kumbaga, naririnig lang natin. So later on, madidiscuss ko sa inyo kung paano gagamitin ang mga radio, television, at the same time, yung smartphones. Okay, in radio audio programming, sabi ng mga iba na mga, mga critics, say that can this yung more expensive. Pero yung iba naman, ma-afford nila kaysa sa mga laptop or computer. And then, in radio audio programming, andyan yung one-way. Mamian yung one-way. Paki-click. Ayo. Okay, one-way. So, when we say one-way, it gives a clear direction and learning attainable to both teacher and students. So we may say one way through recalibrating the new style of teaching using these technologies. At the same time, the interactive. May interactive. Interactive. There must be spontaneity of the discussion if there is interaction being observed using radio or audio programming. Sa interactive po, it allows two-way communication. It allows immediate message to the audiences. The third one is a live broadcasting. When we say live broadcasting, ito na yon. Kung hindi ko alam kung naabutan nyo pa ito, elementary, kayo, kasi ako parang hindi ko na naabutan to, pero some of you siguro naabutan nila na yung teacher nila magpapakita siya, anong tawag na dito, magpapakita siya ng mga sample ng mga sasabihin nila. When we say live broadcasting kasi, it refers to someone who is delivering a message and discussing a topic into live broadcast. And the fourth one is a tape broadcasting. In tape broadcasting naman, it is a recorded discussions that may be broadcasted late. For example, so you will prepare your discussions ahead of time and to be broadcasted in a while. Yun yung ibig sabihin ng tape broadcasting. Next. So let's go to the radio and audio program kanina. Paano natin kaya ito magagamit? So why are we use radio? Range. Okay. So we all know that radio remains a viable medium of instruction na kahit saan ka pupunta, mapailog man, mapabundok man, madadala natin ito. And then radio can still reach them. So we may say why reach, ito yung sinasabi na the range of infos can reach the number of listener and viewers. So kahit ilan yung numbers ng listener and viewers ay pwede po siya. Kasi wide reach nga eh. Kumbaga walang limit na numbers ng listeners and viewers. And we also that radio is most efficient and effective learning to deliver our instruction. Okay, next, the transcend illiteracy is calling. So a person does have to know how to read to understand a piece of information. In that case, it really helps illiteracy to catch the discussion, and those inadequate schooling can also be a great help. And The third one and the last one is affordable and affordable. It's affordable because no need to open materials for learners, just use only the listening skills. Later on, didiscuss natin kung ano yung mga listening skills, yung mga prerequisite skills. Next. How? So, paano yan natin mag-develop? Ito yon. Things to be considered. The first is develop prerequisite skills. The second one is convert module into a script. Especially tayong mga DepEd ngayon. Diba? Mga teachers tayo. So, ngayon, yung module na gagawin natin, i-convert natin ito sa script. Pero kung ayaw nyo naman, meron tayong criteria or mga selection program, kung ano yung pinaka madali sa atin na gawin. Tayo din ang masunod eh. Kung ano yung mas madali na magawa natin, yun din yung susundin natin. Alangan magpapakahirap tayo. So next is, yan, listening skills as prerequisite. So how can we develop a prerequisite skills? Ito yon. In all means of communications, one of the indispensable forms is listening. Wherein you scrutinize the messages immediately upon receiving it. This way of teaching it requires your strong listening ability. Yun nga, take note. Ito yon. Remember, we cannot use radio, not develop our listening skills among our students. Kasi, bakit? Kasi kung mahina yung pandinig mo, hindi mo din maririnig yung mga pinagsasabi doon sa radyo. So, dapat kailangan na dapat clear yung tenga mo or yung listen. So, listening skills, there are ways of developing skills. Ito yun. The first one is guide listening. So, paano natin magagawa itong guide listening? So, una, we can start by stating objective. For example, okay class, what will be going today or what will you listen or hear is about fraction. Bakit kaya? Bakit i-state natin yung mga objective na to? Upang sa ganon, ang mga listeners natin or mga learners natin ay mayroon silang ideya kung ano na yung topic natin ngayon. Another one is yon. Sinasabi ko nga sa inyo, enumerate nyo yung mga objectives ninyo. Parang kanina na sinabi ni Ma'am Elenita, before siya mag-discuss, sinabi niya yung mga objectives kasi at the end of lesson, makikita mo kung ano yung effect ng kanyang sinasabi or kalalabasan. And then dito, or sabi na lang natin habang guide listening, you can pose a question. Bakit kaya importante yan? Para mas lalong makikinig ang mga listeners mo at the same time, yung mga students mo. So magbigay ka ng mga question para at the end, alam na nila kung ano yung mga isasagot nila doon sa question na ibibigay mo. The second one is give direction. Tama, napaka-importante yan. Sasabihin mo kung anong direction yung pag-uusapan ninyo ngayon. Di ba kanina ang nasabi ko, yung objective. Sasabihin mo kung ano yung mga topics mo. Ngayon naman, magbigay ka naman ng give direction. Parang ano lang din yan sa test question. Di ba? Nagbibigay tayo ng mga panuto, give direction, para hindi malito yung mga listeners at the same time, yung mga or learners. Next is ask students to listen for main idea or details dito. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, kung alam na nila yung mga topic na binigay mo, makukuha na nila yung main idea ng iyong sinasabi or yung topic na gusto mong ipahiwatig sa kanila. Next is use context in listening. For example, ito yon sinasabi ko. Especially sa mga math teachers. Kung magtuturo ka ng lyrics ng isang song, dapat mabigyan mo sila din ng worksheet or yung fill in the blank kumbaga. Kasi habang napapakinggan nila yung kanta, halimbawa, yung Pangasinan Hymn, yun. Sabihin na lang natin na mayroon silang worksheet doon, habang pinakinggan nila yon, yung mga blanco doon ay sasagutan nila dahil nga nakikinig sila doon sa iyong sinasabi or doon sa kanta. And then, before airing radio pala, ito yon, base doon sa instruction natin, dapat sabihin mo muna, ito class, naibigay ko yung worksheet ninyo, makinig kayo mabuti, kasi may mga sagutan kayo dyan na blanco. Ganun po. And then, wrong relevant ideas. Okay, dito naman, or irrelevant ideas. So, after listening, dapat na-identify nila yung main idea ng iyong sinasabi or or the most relevant ideas na base doon sa main idea na na-identify mo. So, those are the techniques that used to improve listening skills. Next. Let's go to the checklist. Okay. First is minimize extraneous background noise. Okay, ito yung napaka-importante na sinasabi ko. So, while writing your scripts, napaka-importante na tignan muna natin yung mga background natin kung ito ba ay may noise, kung maingay ba ito. Kasi sometimes basta ang nangyayari, re-record lang tayo, pero hindi natin alam pala na may noise pala. Kaya yun nga, sabi ko, ito take note, a small room is a preferable for a normal room. Bakit? Bakit kaya? Kasi yun nga, pag once na maliit lang yung room, mas magandang mag-record kasi yung walang sound na maririnig. Kasi kung nasa malaki ka na room, doon hindi natin alam na may mga aso na tumatahol, may mga ibon. Hindi natin maiwasan, kaya much better na kung maggagawa tayo ng take ng lesson natin, dapat walang ingay. Next, maintain constant volume level. Okay, ito yung napaka-importante. So when you record your first voice, dapat mag-try out ka muna ng 1 minute. Bakit kaya? Kasi kung once na natapos ka na at yun, i-check mo yung volume niya and yung tone ay hindi maganda, anong mangyayari? Okay, nothing is more frustrating pag natapos na kayo, uulitin nyo na naman. So, anong mangyayari? Wasting of time. Next, ensure good voice quality and clarity. Napaka-importante sa ating mga teachers ito. Especially mga English major. Kasi alam nyo naman, yung mga bata, pag once na yung voice quality mo, hindi siya clarity, alam mo naman, tatawanan ka. So, dapat dapat ma-ensure mo na maganda yung voice quality mo, at the same time, clarity. Bakit? Kasi yun nga, sabi ko nga, vary your tone, voice, frequently, yung anong tawag na dito, iwasan natin yung tinatawag na monotonous, yung nakaka-boring, kasi minsan may mga teachers na anong tawag na dito, bored silang mag-discuss. So, yung listeners mo din, yung nakikinig sa'yo, boring din, wala ding interesado doon sa iyong sinasabi. Kaya iwasan natin ang monotonous. Dapat speak cheerfully, enthusiastically, and most of all, speak clearly. Tapos isa pa dito, yung ensure good voice quality and clarity, kasi minsan kasi hindi natin maiwasan, dapat i-minimize natin yung yung mga kumbaga, yung mga distracting anong tawag na dito, yung distracting habits natin, yung hindi kaaya speech habits natin, yung magdi-discuss tayo, tapos di ba? Mayroong mga mga ganun na, anong tawag na dito, distracting speech habits.
Yes po,
Next
sir.
is
Sorry,
yes, ma'am.
sir, interrupt kita. Ang tawag po
Yes
doon
po,
is yung
ma'am.
mga feeders po. Katulad ng ginamit ko kanina. Ganun. So, i-minimize po natin yung mga feeders na po yun.
Dapat iwasan natin yung mga yun. Kasi kung nakalata mga students natin and then listeners natin, sasabihin nila, gagayain ka nila, ni man lang, wanda. Kaya dapat i-minimize natin yung mga yun, ma'am and sir, sa pagre-report.
Yes.
Next.
Tapos isa po po, sir, ang ginagawa ng...
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay, ang ginagawa po ng mga students po natin, especially ngayon, online. So kung marami tayong mga fillers, katulad ng sinasabi natin, okay, like, all right, mga ganun. Kung nasobrahan po natin, ang gagawin nila, i-jot down nila yun, itatali nila. So parang nawala na yung motivation nila. So parang laro na lang ang gagawin nila.
Yes po.
Laro ang sinasabi.
Opo, tama yan, ma'am. Gagayahin ka nila. Kaya dapat tayo, iwasan din natin yun. Pero minsan kasi hindi din natin maiwasan. Pero, yun nga, yung sasabi ko, dapat i-minimize natin. Next is express ideas or content clearly. Dito naman, syempre, una, introduce your audio in a meaning. Sabihin natin yung, for example, this is Araling 7, Quarter 1, Module 4, kagustuhan at pangangailangan, parang ganon. So, i-identify natin yung ating topic para express natin yung ideas at kung ano yung sabihin natin na subject sa kanila. Next, maintain conversational tone. Ito yon. So, talk as you would normally talk to your friend. O kung pag nagsasalita ka, parang normal lang na kausap mo yung friend mo. Hindi yung magsisigawan, parang ganon, nagsisigawan. Hindi, elimit natin yung mga yon. Next is keep learners parent symbol. Ito yon. Kasi ayon, napaka-importante sa araw na ito na dapat ma-involve ang mga parents. Kasi base nga, yung learning natin ngayon ay home-based learning. At the same time, yung mga learners natin. Dahil nga ito yon. For example, yung sa pagkuha ng module, dapat alam nila kung saan nila kukunin yung module na ibibigay natin sa mga bata. Dapat yung parents, sila yung nangunguna. Next, work with your worksheet or study guide. Yan yung sinabi ko sa inyo na kung magbibigay tayo ng mga worksheet sa ating mga bata or study guide, dapat before anong tawag dito, mag-tape or mag-record, dapat na ibigay mo muna yung study guide sa kanila, at the same time, yung worksheets. Para sa ganun, ay ready na sila makinig sa'yo para hindi na, anong tawag dito, dito, para maano natin na interesado sila doon sa iyong topic. Okay, keep it short. Ito yon, napaka-importante. Sa paggawa kasi ng scripts, dapat lang may minutes lang na sundan natin. It should be 15 to 25 minutes only. Kasi kung 30 to 35, ay, maboboring na yung mga bata. Pero ito ang tandaan natin, pag once na magbibigay tayo, syempre, ang gusto ng mga bata, lively. So anong gagawin natin? So mag-ano tayo, dalag ng mga sounds, mga effect, music, para naman ganahan yung mga bata natin. Next. Okay, ito yun. Paano natin i-convert? Convert modules into a script. Sinasabi ko nga sa inyo kanina, kasi tayo mga teachers, ay kailangan natin, yung modules natin, ay i-convert natin ito sa script. Pero, depende sa'yo, kasi merong mga selection criteria o selection program na pwede natin gawin. Nasa sa iyo yan, kung gagawin mo, i-convert mo yung modules mo sa script. Pero, mas, di ba, pag once na tayo ang gagawa, mas pipiliin natin yung madali kaysa yung mas mahirap. Next po ay ang paggawa ng writing scripts. Okay, content used during COVID-19 closures can be reused, schools reopen, and to reach out of school children. Next na po, Ma'am Ean. Hello. Okay, so is one big advantage. They can review the content multiple times, and they're possibly increasing its effectiveness. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina. Okay, Ma'am Ean, sing videos, dapat naka-align po, alignment with objectives. The second one is accurate and information current. Pangatlo ay age-appropriate high language. Pang-apat ay interest level and high engagement. Siyempre, andyan din ang technical quality, easy of use, and bias-free. Ngayon naman, dadako tayo sa writing scripts. Ito yung kanina, kasi nadili lang. Yung content used during COVID-19 closures can be reused when schools reopen and to reach out of school children. Ito yun. Dahil nga, ang video is one big advantage. They can review the content multiple times and they're possibly increasing its effectiveness. Next, complement with expanded access to the internet and devices. Alam naman natin, klaro, napakahirap ang mag-access ng internet. At the same time, yung mga bata natin ay kakaunti ang mga kanilang gadgets. So dapat dito, consider supplementary actions like text messages and print materials. Yan nga yung sinasabi ko na magkakaroon ng modular, yung print material na ibibigay natin sa mga bata. Tapos text messages, kahit hindi natin puntahan ito, kahit walang involved na internet, ay matitext kanila kung paano yung gagawin doon sa binigay mo na worksheet sa kanila. Later on, maano natin yung ano ba ang use ng mobile phones. The last one is consider diversity, equity, and inclusion. So ito yon. So how can we address our students in their special needs? Siyempre, as a teacher, magkaroon tayo ng mga, anong tawag dito, resources kung paano natin maibibigay yung mga worksheet at the same time yung topic na gusto nating ibigay sa mga bata natin. Okay, the last one is, what about mobile phones? Okay, bakit kaya kabilang ang mobile phones ngayon? Okay, mobile phones can be considered low technologies. Dito, pwede na tayong mag-download, hindi na mahirapan yung mga bata, especially mga tertiary level. Pero pag elementary naman, ay mga realia yung gusto nila na tignan. Yung mga kinan na pinakita ni Ma'am Mayan, yun yung mga swak sa kanila. Sa secondary naman, ito, pwede na din gumamit ng mobile phones para hindi sila mahirapan. Minsan nga ang nangyayari, mas madali nilang tignan yung mga kasagutan sa mobile phones kaysa sa mga libro. Okay, magagamit natin ang mobile phones sa ating mga estudyante for asking kung anong nangyari na, kung natapos na ba nila. Di ba ngayon meron ng messenger na kung saan pwede tayong makapag-create ng group chat or GC na sana na ipapasa mo yung gusto mong ibigay sa kanila or yung topic na ibigay mo sa kanila. I-click mo lang, andun na lahat, makikita na nila. Hindi yung isa mo na iti-text tapos isi-send sa wasting of time. Kaya nga napaka-importante talaga itong mobile phones ngayon para naman sa ganun, mas mapadali yung ating trabaho. Through this use mobile phone, pwede silang mag-text sa inyo. Tatanungin nila, ma'am, ano pong gagawin dito? Kahit nabigay ka ng give direction doon sa mga worksheet, binigay mo na worksheet sa kanila, tatanong at magtatanong ang mga bata. Kahit alam na nila na ma'am, bibilugan po ba? Ma'am, ano ang gagawin? Siyempre, as a teacher, sasagutin yung mga tanong nila through mobile phone. Hindi ka na pupunta doon sa kanilang bahay. Gamit ng iyong phone lang, mas mapapadali. Pero paano sa mapita? Yun yung Kasi meron nag-question sa akin, sir, paano sa amin? Sabi nila. Kasi bilong sila sa IT. Paano yung mga mobile phones namin hindi makareceive ng text or call kasi mahina nga yung signal doon sa kanila. So, the best way na gagawin ng mga teachers ay bibigay nila yung modular doon sa kanilang barangay at yung mga parents ang kukuha mismo doon sa barangay. Kasi hindi naman pwede na through phone yung gagamitin nila. Pero sa atin, accessible naman yung mga tawag na dito, madali. Kaya mas kailangan natin ang mobile phones. Learners activities. Paano? Second one is resources portal. The third one is communication. Yan nga, yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, yung mobile phones is a way of communication. Pwede tayo makipag-communicate kahit hindi natin through text, through call, ay mas mapapadali na yung ating trabaho. At the same time, syempre, assessment. I-assess mo yung bata doon sa binigay mo na work study or worksheet sa kanila. Okay, last. Ito yon, yung assessment strategies and tools. Syempre, kung naibigay mo na yung mga study, work study nila, or yung mga worksheets nila, syempre, ang mangyayari, sa self-assessment mo. So, what is the purpose of self-assessment? So, the purpose of self-assessment is to help the individual know the extent of his abilities and to improve upon them without the need of a performance appraiser. So it also involves the use of questions such as, what are my strengths? What are the obstacles? So yun, i-self-assessment mo. And then, peer assessment. So what is the difference between self-assessment and peer assessment? Ito yon. Kasi minsan kasi, kahit sabihin na lang nating merong, anong tanda dito, merong cellphone yung bata, pero hindi siya makasend kasi walang signal, yung katabing bahay niya or mas malapit sa kanya, sasabihin niya na ganito, okay na, pwedeng sabihin mo kay ganito na meron kayong ipapasa ngayon. So, ang mangyayari kasi, is a process whereby students or their peers grade assignments or tests based on a teacher's benchmark. So the practice is employed to save teachers' time and improve students' understanding of course materials as well as improve their metacognitive skills. And the third is portfolio. Siyempre, ang bata or mga anong taon na dito, mga learners natin ay meron silang portfolio. Ito yung compilation of academic work and other form of educational evidence assembled for the purpose determining whether students have met learning standards or helping students reflect on their academic accomplishments. Kaya meron portfolio. And then, kung magpapagawa ka ng mga activity or worksheet, syempre, may rubrics. We see rubrics are often used in conjunction with self and peer assessment. So, it is a typically evaluation tool used to promote the consistent application of learning expectations, learning standards in the classroom, or to measure their attainment against a consistent set of criteria. And last, texting. Yan na yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, na mas madali pag once nagagamit tayo ng mobile phone. Isang click mo lang, andun na. Pero before you click, think twice. Next is delivery of distance learning. Ito yung sinasabi ko na gagawin natin ngayon na kung saan hindi magpapahuli ang Day1 Pangasinan. Ito yung printed modular distance learning. When we say printed modular distance learning, it refers to the use of printed materials that cover the elements of a lesson from motivation, instruction, to assessment. For the upcoming school year, ito yon, print modules will be prepared for learners who have limited access or have absolutely no access to internet and digital services. So, yon ang mangyayari, printed modular distance learning, yung pwede natin ibigay sa ating mga learners. Especially kung hindi sila maka-access sa internet. Next one is the digital modular distance learning. May? Okay, so digital modular distance learning is a type of learning that is accompanied by technology or by instructional practice that makes effective use of technology. So it encompasses the application of wide spectrum of practice, including blended and virtual learning. To jumpstart digital learning, a flash drive with learning modules which are carefully crafted by education program supervisors will be used by teachers. Imagine that. Ito yung, tapos at the same time, not only education program supervisor, but also master teacher. Next is asynchronous distance learning. When we say asynchronous online distance learning, it's a general term used to describe forms of education, instruction, and learning that do not occur in the same place at the same time. So it uses resources that facilitate information sharing outside the constraints of time and place among a network of people. So yun yung ibig sabihin ng asynchronous online distance learning. Then next, asynchronous online distance learning. When we say synchronous online distance learning, it's a kind of learning that happens in real time. So this means that you and your classmates and also the teacher interest in a specific virtual place through a specific online medium and through a specific schedule. Yun naman yung synchronous online distance learning. Next is learn from home. Okay, when we still learn from home, it's home learning is an activity where a learner is asked to complete outside of the school day, either of their own or with an adult. So home learning can range from reading a book, allowed to completing a research project about a specific subject. So yun yung mga learning nating distance learning. Next. So, according to Holmes 2020, when the world eventually looks back on 2020, there will be much to learn from each other. Educational responses crises are capable of changing the meaning, purposes, and values of school, and could potentially help to shape more humanistic futures for education and learning. Once again, thank you so much.
Okay, so yan. Thank you so much, Sir Ariel, for that very extensive discussion. Thank you po sa ating mga speakers na ginawa ang lahat, no, na para magtuloy ang ating pong webinar. There are challenges, pero at least natapos din po. And we just hope po na all of yung mga naituro sa atin ng ating mga speakers ay will will accept them, and then will apply them sa ating pong paggawa ng ating mga modules. ano po, or ng ating pong mga materials natin, learning materials natin for our students.